get civilly mortis. And these was in reference to those tribes that was fighting in the Conjur War, that what they called them nappy head Negroes. We was fighting in the Conjur War against some nappy head Negropeans. Mm-hmm. So we had to educate ourselves enough to see the Conjur War, as well as what's taking place on the land, and they don't have to look the same. Because sometimes they don't look the same. Because they can tell you one thing while they doing another. But they told us how they was going to do it in the Protocols of Zion. They told us what they was going to do in the Morals and Dogma. While they doing it, they telling all of us we not doing none of this stuff we told y'all we was doing, but we watching them play it out in the public as a whole stage show of politics and Hollywood cinema.
Hey, Rod, it's called an indictment. Before you go into criminal court, they got to give you an indictment.
And that's so only if they got a grand jury, though.
That's what I'm saying. So but like in any crime, in any criminal case, the first thing they got to hand you is an indictment. It don't matter without the grand jury or not. Any criminal case.
Now watch this. When you go to court, you know what they call a preliminary hearing?
Yeah.
That's where they gathering the evidence for the indictment that you're talking about. They don't give it to you first. Yeah. You have to first get bound over. This is the indictment. When they bound you over from district to circuit, that piece of paper that they require is the indictment. That's why you need to go to the district court before you go to the circuit court. Because you first have to get what's called a true bill indictment. Either you have a preliminary hearing or a grand jury. The thing about the grand juries and why they loved them so much in Chicago, because they had what they call secret indictments, where somebody made a complaint and they wrote you up this whole case, put it in front of the grand jury in a secret indictment, issued an indictment for your arrest as if it was legit. But it was all done in secret.
Damn.
It's called a secret indictment.
So really, you would have told me up front.
Not only that, he done got drawn into something that will reveal a lot about these police stations around the country.
Yeah.
And when we talking about approaching the city manager for a police-related issue, we talking about obvious corruption.
That's correct.
So when we see the corruption, we don't know who to report it to or who to talk to about it. So now when you see the corruption in this era, videotape it, and you know to send it to the city manager. You got police officers that pull you over to give you a ticket, but he'll take $100 if you let him to let you go.
I got something to show you on that too.
Right. All this is police corruption that internal affairs, right? Internal affairs used to handle it, but now since the AI has been removing their funding gradually.
Yep.
So they've been downsizing their departments trying to stay in business.
That's correct. He's called some other folks that I know.
So do you want me to tell them how the scam works?
Go with.
So what they do is they get a position at an office, a federal office, no matter what position it is, long as they can get the cards. This is why he don't have no state seal on there, because all of the people that get a position through the state gives them their business cards with the seal on them.
That's right.
They'll get similar business cards made up and find somebody that's prominent in the community making good money running a business of some kind.
Yeah.
Then they come to them as an investigator.
Yep.
And tell them that they need to pay a fine or a fee for something that they didn't do or did do.
It's a good prime example.
So once they get you to believing that they legitimate, they give you who to make the payment out to, and it's normally a dummy corporation that sound like an official government agency. And then they use those private police to make it look like they the real police and
That's
that is
correct.
legitimate as an intimidation factor.
Yeah,
So the average person is gonna be that's trying to do what's right, gonna be like, okay, I pay the fine, I pay the fine. And then they say, well, you got a $60,000 fine. We need you to either write out a check or a money order to this such and such State Department, right? It don't exist for real,
right?
But they got a dummy corporation set up with the same name.
That's correct.
And so
and that's what
executive order done under the Trump administration that gave FEMA the jurisdictional control over the all policing agencies. The thing is, if FEMA take over, they can only operate through the National Guard. They can't operate through what we call contracted police forces. All of these police forces is chartered, and all of their charters are extensions of Interpol that goes through the United Nations back to England, back to the Vatican. So when we recover the land, we in reconstitution the government. This is the March of the Matriarchs in the month of March. And when you start seeing the unfoldment of the dismantling of police, you're going to see the presence of the National Guard. This is part of the transitional government, and the tribes reach a certain jurisdictional supremacy on the land. So this is what all of the QAnons be talking about and different people like that, because this is where you start to see coming into fruition all of the processes of government being transitioned over into the control of the tribal networks that's being established as part of the process of transition. Being printed and published at. None of the copyrights or none of the publishing of any of the American law books is from America. This is Oxford University, and at Oxford, it's one of the major institutions of learning in Europe.
There it is right there. This brings up, and here's the proof in the pudding right here.
Street, Great Clarendon Street, Oxford, OX2 6DP, United Kingdom. Oxford University Press's Department of the University of Oxford. It furthered the university objective of excellence in research, scholarship, and education by publishing worldwide. Oxford is the registered trademark of Oxford University Press in the UK and in certain other countries. West Yorkshire Police Authority, 2013. Now remember, Yorkshire is what New York is named after. New Yorkshire, and the moral right of the author have been asserted. Ain't that about it? First edition published in 2006. This is the police handbook, the guidelines that the police are supposed to go by. It was exiling Moors out of Spain during the Inquisition and the French Revolution. And those were the ones who came to take over here. This is the lodge. The Scottish Rite Lodge was over the Scottish Rite Banks. And so they was using their financial resources to support the 32-degree Scottish Rite Freemasons that came over here to fight in the Conjur War. All of their feds is in the George Washington Memorial Museum.
Can you explain the word conjure? Because I know a lot of people have asked me that. Can you please backtrack a little bit and give the define that, Rod?
So what a conjure means to draw something forth. And the reference here is drawing forth something from the spiritual realm to control what's going on in the physical world. So when we talk about voodoo conjure, they're using the laws of nature to draw something forth from the spiritual world to manifest in the physical world. They use various different means of magic or magical practices. We call some of them sorcery. Some of them is just called the priesthoods. And so anybody involved in calling forth from the spirit realm any source of power is a conjurer, knowingly or unknowingly. In this case, we talk about the conjure war. That's using the spirit realm to fight in the physical world. And it plays out in the physical world according to the type of practice used to activate the spiritual energy. This conjure war is the cycle within cycles. So it's a miniaturized version of something called the Anunnaki Wars and some called the Egyptian Priest Wars. They all cycles within cycles. So they keep repeating the same thing. So there's a frame of reference to flip out of the cycles, to break the pattern. So in order for us to break the conjure, the major part of keeping the conjure in place is secrecy. So we expose the conjure war to the people so that the people can analyze it and take their energy from it. That's so now they can use your energy in secret to harness and maintenance their conjures that they done in the backfield for you to play it out in the front, in the 3D. So you got all type of people participating. You got ancient shamans that still live in what they call uncivilized communities, using their conjure magic to bring about peace on earth. And you got Buddhist monks, and you got Islamic Sufis, you got Hindu yogis. They're all around the world working together to try to push the energy to shift us back to the matriarchy. All of your lodges, all of your fraternities, all of your sororities, they trials and tribulations is to bring in a higher frequency of energy to balance out the people of the planet. We take sides in the drama that's playing out in the 3D world without knowing the spiritual significance of the events. So by understanding what we talk about when we say the conjure wars, I could tell them exactly which conjure war we breaking out of, which is the murder of Crispus Attucks, the first to die in the American Revolution. This is called the shedding of the first blood. By writing the Constitution in his blood, you activate in a doctrine something called the blood of the righteous. And it's written in the Bible that the blood of the righteous shall not be spilled in vain, which all of the people assert they believe that. So that make you follow the edicts of the ones steering the narrative of the blood that was spilled in the Revolutionary War. Mm-hmm. In order for his blood to be not in vain, we have to fulfill the agreement of what was written with his blood. That agreement is to follow the Constitution for 200 years while we have amnesia, and the people that came, they wasn't called Moors yet. They was called French, Dutch, Portuguese, English, Scottish Rite Freemasons, Shriners. They all came over here to challenge the royals of the land to a conjure war as a ceasefire to the Gullah Wars. And this is why they could tell the story narrative in the way to make us have patriarchal patriarchal, patriotic allegiance to the invaders to usurp the divine feminine. But the people from the land is going to follow the nature of who they is. And as we grow up, we as the men going to start speaking out against the rogue patriarchy, which is the rouge patriarchy, which is the red patriarchy.
Okay. So,
right?
okay. So what we're looking at right here is
The Gullah Big Mama was from the Carolinas, and you from the Carolinas. She called us all to war against the invading Spanish that was coming in and invading the islands in southern Florida at the time.
mm-hmm.
And then we were fighting English in the north in the New York area. And then we were fighting the French on the Louisiana territory. Mm-hmm. And she was calling us in because they was trying to enforce what the Vatican called the right of discovery. Mm-hmm. To enforce the white man's burden under the papal bulls.
So
we was all called to war for to Florida, and now we being all called for peace and love to Florida. Turn around.
Hey, go ahead.
So the reason that is because the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines is for fighting overseas wars. They're not for fighting domestic warfare. The National Guard it comes from the militia of the land. They just federalized them and monetized them and called them the National Guard. But they was originally the original militias who was supposed to take down the rogue government to begin with. So when they come in as the policing force, they coming in because of a political disruption that would make the people be belligerent to the system and the system belligerent to the people. Now, the National Guard is not going to treat us like the police. They being instructed to treat everybody like a family member that they came to give assistance to finish a project or something. So all of the police can be sheep dipped by the National Guard if they choose to, but they gonna be real selective of the mentality of people they sheep dip from police forces, because a lot of them been trained to just perform in a pack manner. They can't be an independent critical thinker and be a police officer. It's part of the requirement. Mm-hmm. So all of the police won't be useful for the National Guard to accept when they screen them. But if the ones who come in that's been treating the neighborhood like they family members all the time, you know, help the old lady carry her groceries up to the house, them kind of police, they'll keep them kind. Because when you have somebody on the land that keep mistreating the people, you make the people rebel one way or another. So we had to use National Guard, and the National Guard can also sheep dip from branches of the military to bolster its ranks, which they've been doing over the last 4 years or so.
They become part of this new, because they was originally part of the new our tribal police or whatever. The police department.
So when the National Guard take over, the Empress gonna have to establish a new office of the Marshal, the Tribal Marshal. And the Tribal Marshal will then have extensions called Sharif. But that's gotta be restructured, because we can still use the structure they have, but we need to retrain them on how to interact with the people, because we're not finna keep putting up with this shoot them in the back shit.
Right.
Fill him up with lead till you look like a pencil. We done with that.
Yeah.
So we gotta transition till we can take control of our own communities, so we don't have to deal with those things no more. So
go ahead.
Somebody was asking about the inmate population. So the local communities are going to be required to set up programs for when the ones from their local community get reintroduced to the community, they got to have something productive for them to do to keep them inspired to live a better life. Just why all these executive orders, there's so many of them, they're hard to keep up with. But when you start reading enough of them, you realize that everything that the government had stolen from us in power was put under the presidential jurisdiction of FEMA, and FEMA was captured by the tribal nations to be the outreach arm on the flip side, because it was already stockpiled for them to use it to take over. But instead of letting them take over, we using the resources that they had on reserve to service the people's needs. We're not trying to take the money from the resource from the people. When you seen that extraction system that was in place, it was a fractional reserve banking system. And under that system, it was designed to keep the wealth from ever being realized by the people who was earning it. So the tax system was set up, but there's no law for us to pay taxes. It's all voluntary, but we don't know it's voluntary. But then you got to go back to taxation without representation and say, where was we ever represented in this income tax scheme that came about in 1933? Well, there's no record of when we was represented by anybody who understood the taxation. Because it was implemented, they didn't ask us for permission. We wasn't represented. We didn't have no say in that. So that's taxation without representation. That's enough for us to switch government.